because culture is infectious, good or bad. And if we feel that way, then fix it. But identify the why start with the why. But a lot of times we as owners and managers of a company, you've got to go back to that beginner's mindset of how to explain things to where anybody can understand. Because not all of us are numbers people, or not all of us are KPI people, or some people don't want to be held accountable to them if they don't feel they're achievable.
Chris Koch, welcome back to the Site Shed.
Matt, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
You must get that all day, man.
The mispronunciation?
Yeah.
I do. Yeah. And the beauty of it is having a kid now, she gets to deal with the mispronunciation also. So I passed it along to somebody else.
Yeah, but maybe one day she'll be able to hand that off. You, unfortunately, are stuck with it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, having a girl, she could pick up somebody else's last name. So we'll see what happens.
My wife went from having the world's most unpronounceable last name to having the world's most generic name. So I'm not sure which one she prefers.
Good point. Yeah, Jones is definitely a little bit easier. So,
man, well, welcome back. It's been a minute, that's for sure. We spoke back in episode 305, which was July 14, 2021, when that got published. I'm struggling to believe it's been that long, but anyway, here we are.
It's fairly terrifying how fast time goes by.
Absolutely. Mate, how's things been between now and then?
Really good. Yeah, really good. BDR continues to grow. We've added some phenomenal employees and working with some great clients. I've had about a little over half a dozen of them sell their businesses and move on to other parts of life. So we hit their goals and just a lot of great stuff.
Unreal. Your background's HVAC, isn't it? Actually, do you want to give a bit of an intro into, a bit of your story for the guys that aren't familiar?
Yeah, I graduated high school a long time ago, back in 1986. Spent 4 years in the United States Marine Corps, honorably discharged, and I've been in the trade since about July of 1990. Held about every role except some accounting positions, but I owned a business for a very short period of time. General manager, sales manager, vice president of service, and right out a decade with BDR. So it's been an amazing career. Truly blessed to be in these industries, to be in the home services trades and be a part of the HVAC world.
And run us through BDR.
Yeah, so BDR is a training and coaching company. We're out of Seattle, Washington. Got about 100 employees all across the country. June of last year, we added BXB Media into our family. So we blew up to about 200 employees, and it's a great organization. So we take care of clients all across the United States, within the home services industries, locksmith even, a little bit of everything.
Fantastic. Man, that's a lot of staff, 250.
It's a great organization. Yeah, looking forward to June of this year. We have an annual meeting. Everybody gets together, and I believe we're taking over an entire hotel this year. So it's
no kidding. Pretty awesome. Wow. That's insane, man. And when we last spoke back in 2021, what did the team look like back then?
Probably about 60 to 70 employees total back then. So just exponential growth and exponential opportunities. It's been amazing.
How has that growth played out at your end, management wise?
For me, I work for the same lead head coach, a guy named Jeff Plant, and our vice president of coaching, Tammy Vasquez, are still in my chain. So I am lucky with who I get to work for. And then Kim Archer's our president, Bruce Weisen's our CEO. And so for me, those folks have always been in my life for the 10 years I've been here. So it's been pretty awesome.
But you guys, would you throw yourself into sort of the coaching realm?
I am. I'm more on the coaching and training side. So I travel about 70 days a year to do training classes. And then in between, I actively coach 17 to 20 clients with 2 calls a month and working with them and helping them grow their businesses, create accountability for them and their team, create an organization that people want to be a part of and make money. That's the backside, because if you're not profitable, you can't afford to grow. You can't afford to take care of your team.
Sure. Yeah. Cool. I mean, look, we're here today the floor's yours, really. I guess we sort of wanted to discuss some things maybe around recruitment and retention and things like that. But I guess wherever we see, trends or opportunities or conversations that you think are relevant within the trade space these days, I'm all ears.
Yeah, I think one of the big things is because it starts with being intentional, right? We got to understand who we are as an organization. I just finished reading Simon Sinek's Start With Why, and just a fantastic book. But as we bring it back to employees and who we are, it does start with why. Why do we exist? Why does our company exist? What's our brand statement? What's our mission, our vision, our values? Who are we? What do we stand for? It was a great thing to go through and like I said, just kind of remind ourselves of getting back to the basics sometimes. And any call we run, any install we run, any sales call we do is, why are we going out there? What's the point of what we do every day?
Yeah, I think a lot of, it was interesting. We recently had a really awesome event out in Australia here, which was put on by the crew over at Service Titan. And, there's a lot of really good speakers there, really high caliber. And I think, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And there were so many things that I've heard so many times before, and then I heard them again in different various talks throughout that event. And I was like, it was like this revelation. And it was funny. I was telling one of my buddies who was speaking out there, wow, this really hit home. And one of the things he said in his presentation was, the chances are you know what to do. Like, most of you know what to do. It's just a matter of, who you decide you want to be and when you decide you want that to happen. And I was like, it's so true. Like, you read all these books and you're like, oh, wow, that's interesting. But you kind of know it for the better part. Like, a lot of these things are kind of common sense. It's just the time and the place that you're ready to sort of take action,
I think you hit the nail right on the head that when you're ready to learn, the teacher will appear, the educator will appear. I think you're right, because I've tried reading a couple of those books before, and some of the other ones that I've written in the last probably 3 or 4 years have really sunken in a lot more than they certainly did when I've tried them in the past. And I think a big part of it is having an open heart and an open mind and being willing to learn. I think is probably one of the biggest things. And the same thing comes to employees. Like, you and I were talking a few minutes ago, and congratulations on your newborn. But my daughter turned 18.
She's almost 4.
Almost 4. Yeah,
she was closer to. She was almost born when we last spoke. But yeah.
Yeah, well, sorry about that. Yeah, it's like I said, terrifying how fast time goes by. But my daughter turns 18 in September, and I can say something to her, and then somebody else can say something, the exact same thing, and she's like, "Oh, that makes perfect sense to me." So a lot of it is the messenger too, and I'm really willing to listen when someone wants to teach.
Yeah, and that's what I love this about. I've noticed that over the years on this podcast, especially, like, we'll have people on, and I love when they say stuff, like, especially clients. I feel like sometimes clients can be kind of like kids. Like, you can just tell them to do things so many times and they just stop listening, and then you hear it from someone else and it's like, and they're like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm like, that's a great idea. Do what they said. Don't listen to me. It's just, it's funny. But anyway.
It's absolutely the truth. And so I'm very fortunate. I work with about 17 or 18 companies, and it's the same way. We can be saying the same message, and you change one word, and all of a sudden everything just clicks. And when it comes to employees and all that, we've got to understand kind of who we're talking to and change our messaging as the manager or leader of a department or of a company to make it fit the people that are listening. Not because they're not going to change to listen to you. You've got to change on how you speak and how you get that message out there so everybody in the audience can understand it.
Sure. Yeah. Look, it's one of those conversations that never really goes stale or goes away, the whole, recruitment and retaining team members and that kind of dynamic. I know I've had Tom Howard on the show a number of times now, and he talks a lot about how within their recruitment and retention process, they put such a big emphasis on like performance-based incentives and things like that, where essentially their team members, aren't capped on what they can earn. And his sister Catherine was talking at the show, and she came on the podcast as well actually a little while back, and I think she said like their lowest paid service technician last year did like $150,000 or something.
Wow. Yeah, that's phenomenal. That's game-changing life money right there.
That's right. I mean, their top tech is like he made like 2.2 million or something. So like it's pretty insane. But anyway, the reason I bring that up is because like they kind of use that messaging within their recruitment and retention process, and they never have problems finding staff because they've got queues of people that are trying to kick the door in to work for them because they know it's such a good ecosystem and such a good business that, they get remunerated so well for.
Well, but that was also intentional. That didn't happen by accident. They become that employer of choice, and that's, I'm very fortunate. I teach some different classes for BDR, and one of the big things we talk about is, and even as a coaching client, is you've got to become the employer of choice. You've got to have a culture of accountability, but you've got to have a culture within your company that other people want to become a part of. And when you become that, you're that top 10% or 20% of your marketplace, that you're not running ads anymore. Your team recruits for you. Your customers recruit for you. They're like, you need to go to work for this kind of company. And that's a whole nother level of engagement. It's everything, but it doesn't happen by accident. You got to wake up every day and look at yourself in the mirror and go, we're going to do amazing things today. And that's a big part of that.
So can we unpack some of those things? Because I think typically, people think, when I'm looking for staff, I need to go and, create a job ad and post it on the job board. And, and then it's the same businesses that are always looking for team and always have this high churn. And, the businesses that do it well never seem to have that problem. And I think it's probably a testament to what you've just said there, or some of those, some of those details. So I'd love to sort of get stuck into some of those things.
Yeah, I think the big ones, like I said, it starts with the culture, and like I said, a lot of the training classes I do, I challenge people. You need to ask yourself, would I want to work here? And if the answer is yes, then wahoo, right? Then put some gas in it. Let's keep running what we're doing because what you're doing is working. But if the answer is maybe or no, the next question needs to be, why do I feel that way? Because if you feel that way as a leader or an owner or a manager, I'll guarantee you the rest of your team feels that way because culture is infectious, good or bad. And if we feel that way, then fix it. But identify the why start with the why. But why do we feel like that? And there were days in my past lives. I'm very fortunate to work for BDR. I don't think I've ever had a day in 10 years where I felt like, no, this isn't where I want to be. In my past life, there were some days I did, and I had to look deep into myself and go, why is that? Was it me setting the wrong tone for the day? Was it somebody set me off on a phone call or a text message or whatever? Or, do you want to become the victim mentality, or do you want to become a driver and have an organization that sets the bar higher than everybody else around you? And I think all of us should wake up every day and say, you know what, yesterday was a great day. Today's going to be just a little bit better. The book over the old adage of, the only easy day is yesterday. There's a lot of truth to that. And we've got to drive it every single day. It's our chance. It's our opportunity. If you want to take it or let it go by. And I want to be a part of a company, and I think most of us do, that wants to change the world and set the bar just a little bit higher every single day. But it's up to us to set that tone.
So I guess in creating a strong culture, we want to clearly conceptualize and make sure that people understand what the vision is, like where the business is headed and what we want to achieve, right? So what does that typically look like in the day-to-day of a business? I mean, obviously, you walk into the offices and you see, these are our vision, mission, and values, and they're stuck on a wall somewhere. But for the better part, it probably doesn't really tick all the boxes in terms of driving it home. It's more ticking a box without actually living and breathing it, right?
That's the key right there. Yeah, I don't want to just check the box because I can say, yeah, we have them. Because if you don't actively live them, then don't even bother building them out. I mean, because then you're just going through the motions and everybody can see through that, right? You can look right at the intentionality of that and go, you just check the boxes, but you didn't really care. If you don't hire to them, if you don't hire to your values and hire to people that are going to make you better and drive your vision forward, you're making a mistake from the very beginning. And that's hard for a lot of us because it's hard to hire. It's hard to find great people. It's easy to find the knuckleheads, fairly easy. But I want to hire people that are going to help take me forward and challenge me in growing the organization. And sometimes that means not hiring the first person who walks in the door because you're in desperation mode and need people. But again, you've got to be intentional with that and have the mission and vision and values, but read them aloud in your meetings and truly believe in them. Because if you don't walk the walk, your team never will. Because they're looking right at you going, if you don't believe in it, why should I? If you're not passionate, I'm not going to give you my passion. I'm going to go someplace else that brings the best out in me.
One thing that we've seen work quite well within our business is we have our I mean, yeah, okay, so we tick the box. We had the vision, mission, values. We had that for years, right? And no one really understood or gave a shit what any of them were. But then over the last maybe 4 or 5 years, we've really been, if for better or worse, when things happen within the business, whether it's like giving someone kudos, like for doing something great, or pulling them aside for doing something that they should have done differently, always tying that back to one of the values. Mm-hmm. So hey, just well done, like on doing this thing that really ties into our leadership value or whatever it might be, right? So that kind of, and then all of a sudden you sort of have these this sort of system in place where you're getting recognised for doing something that's in line with one of the values that tie to the business, or the vision or the mission or whatever it might be. That's been pretty effective, but I'm sure there's a lot better ways to do it. Like you see these businesses have these insane cultures, and they're just like, it almost seems like a cult.
Yeah, and
what you want, right?
I think what you want to have is that kind of environment that's like that. I mean,
sure.
But like you said, you guys made a decision 4 or 5 years ago to start changing that and start rewarding the right behaviors and coaching the wrong ones. Now, we always praise publicly and coach privately. You always got to remember that. Don't let your emotion overrun you and take somebody on in a meeting, because you just destroy everybody in that process. But it's intentional. Like you said, 4 or 5 years ago, you guys made that decision to do that. And it is about rewarding the right behavior. And again, holding people accountable when they're not doing the right things.
Sure.
We can't be afraid of that. And a lot of times in the trades as a whole, we're terrified to hold people accountable, because what if they leave? Well, what if you don't hold them accountable and they stay and destroy your culture? Because the rest of your team is watching. If you're willing to accept mediocrity, why would I want to be anything better than that for you?
So one thing I know that Tom and Catherine do within their Fresno business very effectively is they have to, right? Because they've, like, essentially Catherine doubled that business within 12 months organically without any acquisitions or anything. And the way that they did that, she basically went to the team and she said, if I pay you twice as much, will you work twice as hard? And they said, well, yeah. And so but all the management and stuff are like, you can't do it. It's impossible. They're maxed out. They're tapped out. And so she grew that business organically from 30 million to 60 million in a year. And she didn't add a single, she lost one tech. So they didn't grow their team at all. Right. And I was blown away by that. But then at the end of the day, essentially what they do is they make sure that, first of all, and this is something that we're constantly trying to develop and improve in the business, and it's something I do struggle with is, and I'm sure a lot of other businesses out there do as well, is making sure that their team members know exactly what those goalposts look like. And as Tom would say, if they don't know what they're going to make out of this, if they can't communicate that really simply, then it's too complicated. And, the example that he uses is if you've got, like an incentive sort of, and I don't want to sort of take this conversation completely down incentive pay by any measure, but, this is the example. If that team member is on call, like, and they're working after hours and they get a call come in and they're sitting at the dinner table with their partner or wife or whatever, and it's like, I've got to take this call, and the wife's like, well, how much are you going to get paid to take this job? And if you can't tell her that, if you don't know exactly if this job's going to be 30 grand and I'm going to take home 3 grand out of this, like, then she's going to get the shit, and there's going to be that level of animosity. So I think, but just simplicity is kind of key in helping people understand exactly what the KPI is and what's expected, so they know if they're on track.
Yeah, and at BDR, we obviously believe, I want to pay people a great hourly wage, and I'm going to hold you accountable to that, and I'm going to put spiffs and commissions in place for my salespeople. But I am 100% agreement with spiffs on service techs and installers for doing the right thing, selling accessories, do memberships, whatever you want to do with that. But I've got to know what's in it for me, the WIFM, right? What's in it for me? Yeah. That is a part of all this stuff. And when you recruit and to get people on board, you've got to have job descriptions that they know what the responsibilities are. How do I know I'm winning today so I can keep my job? But what do I need to do to get to that next level? And what do those KPIs look like? And if you're right, if we can't communicate that in a way that makes sense to anybody or everybody, then we're probably missing the opportunity. And it's a lot of times we as owners and managers of a company, you've got to go back to that beginner's mindset of how to explain things to where anybody can understand it. Because not all of us are numbers people, or not all of us are KPI people, or some people don't want to be held accountable to them if they don't feel they're achievable. And I'm all about stretch goals, all about that. But I've got to be able to communicate that to everybody, and again, tie it back to a job description and tie it back to what you need to do every day to be successful in the job you were hired to do. And I will hold you accountable to that. I'm going to pay you great wages, but I'm going to hold you accountable to what you said you could do and what you were willing to do for the job.
What are some of the other levers you see in effective culture strengthening within organizations? And I mean, you might even want to use BDR as an example for this, because I mean, growing from 60 staff through to 250 in the space of 4 years, like that doesn't come without problems, especially with, culture and things like that. So, what are some of the things that you've seen work well?
I think one of the biggest things, and I apologize if I misspoke earlier, we did acquire BXB and we grew to about 200. So not 250 yet, but I know that's part of the goal is to get there. But one of the biggest things we have is we've got a very, I understand the org chart. I know exactly who I report to, and I know who to go to for help. That's a big part of that. But we do hold each other accountable, and we do live our values. And I do know what our mission is and what our vision is, and but I know where we're going, and I know our values, and I know I'm a part of that. And there's a big part of it. Like I said, my lead, Jeff, is phenomenal. We do one-on-ones every single month with each other. And now if I need something in between, he's not going to tell me, no, you need to wait till the first Monday of the month, because that's when I have time for
sure.
He'll grab a call at any time, or Tammy will, and that's another side of that, is making sure that you truly have an open door policy, that if you've got a question or a concern with something, I can go to anybody and talk about that. And when I say a true open door, we always have our favorites, and I know when my last company, there were certain people who walk up to the door and you're very welcoming, and some of you are like, oh, you again? And again, people can sense that. And I had to learn to temper that, to make sure I did treat everybody truly as they wanted to be treated and as equal as possible. But I think that's one of the big ones, is you've got to be approachable, but you've got to hold people accountable to the job that they said they would do. Mm-hmm. And don't be afraid of that. If you end up losing somebody who was a great revenue producer, but they're a cultural terrorist, that's not a win for you long term.
Well, I mean, you see that all the time, don't you? Especially in like acquisitions, where you've got these people that just aren't willing to embrace the new culture for reasons that may be justified, whatever. But I guess I've heard so many times that sort of scenario where they've had to let go of the biggest like revenue producer based on the fact that they were the bad apple.
Yeah,
culturally.
And sometimes it ties it back to it again, is with the acquisition side, or even just hiring them, right? You hire somebody that on paper everything was great, they interviewed extremely well. You bring them in, and all of a sudden it's a week or two in, and you find out this maybe isn't who I thought they were going to be. But maybe you got to go back and explain to them again what's in it for them, Or if you do an acquisition and you've got that amazing person that's just a super strong producer, but they don't fit into the organization anymore, is have the conversation and say, look, here's the expectation. Why aren't we meeting it? And don't be afraid to have the conversation. Like I said, the rest of your team is watching, and if you accept that from one person, your other high performers are like, well, I'm going to drop back down a notch because I don't want to have to work harder than this person is if I don't have to.
Sure.
You've got to treat everybody with the same expectation if they're in the same role, obviously.
Talk me through some of the one-on-ones.
Yeah, I think that, so if you're in an organization now that's never done them, like maybe you're in the company for 5 or 6, 7 years and you've never held a one-on-one, typically the only person who's afraid of that is the manager that has to start doing them. Your team wants to talk to you. They want you to know what's going on in both their personally, a little more private on some of that, but on their professional life, they want to know what's happening. They want you to know if they're in a good position or if they're stressed out. So don't be afraid to have the conversation. And don't overthink it. I mean, there's just a couple basic questions. It's like, how are you really doing? Both personally and professionally, and then get to know them that way. And what can we as an organization, can I do as your manager to help make your work life better is what I'm looking to do. And don't overthink it. It doesn't have to be 50 questions and all that. It's an open conversation of what can we do better to help you and how are you really doing? And then stop talking and be willing to listen. It's an active listening, right? Don't just listen to respond. Listen to help solve the problem if they've got one. That's That's the hardest part, is listening to listen, not listen to respond.
Is monthly a good cadence that you've, in your experience, for one-on-ones? Yeah.
Yeah. The days, and there's still some people out there that love to do that annual performance review, and we don't necessarily ignore them the other 364 days, but we don't invest in them like we should. Those days are long gone. Have to be. Please get that out of your mentality right now. And if you've never done them, and I know everybody's already busy and you've already got a day job, then start investing at least quarterly. But ultimately, I want you to meet with your team at least one-on-one monthly. We have to, and
individually.
We're all busy. I understand that. But most of us take lunch or grab somebody for a coffee in the morning. Find time. If you don't make the time to invest in your team, you're truly missing out on an opportunity.
There's so we've recently sort of gone back to, well, I mean, I say gone back to, but truthfully, it's not really gone back to. It's sort of more evolved and taken more seriously the EOS sort of management structure, Gino Wickman traction, that kind of style. And the big moving reason for that was one of two things. First of all, communication, which tied into us really cleaning up, all of our project management and operating systems and things like that, just to sort of improve the task-based communication within the business and things like that. But then also the meetings. And, I really, there's a lot of power in a well-structured meeting. And I guess I'm not talking one-on-ones necessarily right now, but what we're finding even with like the department relevant meetings is that it really does, it saves a lot of time in micro meetings, like constant micro meetings, because if you can have this well-structured meeting where, once a week, and you can talk to things that are relevant within that given department or area of the business, then, people kind of typically know what they're supposed to be doing, and they don't really have to have all these micro conversations throughout the week in line with what you've already discussed in that main meeting. So that's been super useful for us.
What changed with you guys? What made you want to get back to that?
Okay, so what we got to, I mean, this is common, you get the business to a certain point, and the systems and the processes or whatever that have gotten you to there won't get you to the next stage. And we sort of hit that bottleneck we're like, okay, with this, what we're doing here is fractured. We need to really rebuild some of these systems operationally so that we can now get to the next stage. And so we're kind of at that point now, we're about to re-pull the trigger on the marketing and stuff like that, because we're confident now that we've got the right systems, the right people, the right delivery processes, and all that kind of stuff is kind of dialed in now. But truthfully, it took us 8 months to sort of rebuild all that. And okay. I mean, it's never going to be perfect, but the point is I've read this so many times in books, and I thought this has got to be a load of shit, but it really isn't. Like, you get to a point where you're like, what's going to get you to, $1, $2, $3 million business is not going to get you to 10.
That's true.
And so there was a lot of work that had to be done to sort of equip us for that next leap. And that came at a cost, like we had to basically stop marketing and stop, all that kind of stuff, because we needed to fix the holes in the bucket,
Yeah, but you've got to be willing to look at it and see it too, and you're right. What got us to, we call it the wall. You're going to hit that wall. You got that pre-wall, then you've got wall 1, wall 2, wall 3. And part of it's revenue, especially in the trades, part of it's revenue. But the other side of it is, how many transactions can we run with each person? It's more of a transactional wall, but you will hit that spot where you physically cannot run one more service call. We're maxed. We are truly tapped out. No matter what we do, pay more money. No matter what we do, we just can't get there from here. So you have to look at the processes and say, here's what's working. Here's what's not. What do we need to implement, or who do we need to hire? What kind of overhead do we need to take on? And I'm an overhead adverse person. I'm risk adverse when it comes to adding overhead, and I'm not going to do it just to be able to say I've added 5 new people in the company. Well, if there's not a return on investment to that, I'm going to back down a little bit from that. And that's what happens to a lot of owners, is they take on that overhead to get to that next revenue cycle, and they don't get there fast enough, and they freak out. So they cut things back, and they fall back to that position of being comfortable, and they never grow correctly, because it is scary. I mean, when you did what you were talking about, 8-month time frame, and it was expensive, you probably hired some people, you slowed down a little bit, revenue might have dropped off a little bit. that can be fairly terrifying. And that's where having that clear vision of where we're going with this stuff is so critical.
Well, we kind of truthfully went the other way, where like we realized that we just had a lot of non-productive positions in the business. Okay. So we got rid of a bunch of team and tightened up systems so that when we are at the position where we can, scale again, we're going to do it with a lot more efficiency. That was part of the whole tidying up the project management side of things as well. Just because what got us there was it got us to where we wanted to go, but it sure as heck wasn't going to get us the next stage. Like it was just an impending nightmare.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's probably not an uncommon journey for a lot of businesses out there. But I think like understanding and realizing that there are limitations there, and then proactively taking. And again, like I was saying earlier in the call, like when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. Same thing, right? Like, okay, I know there's going to be a problem here. Let's go and find the right information, tools, resources, books, coaching, whatever it might be to fix that. Half of those things I knew. I just had to go back and sort of retrain myself, reread those books and, speak to those people again so that I absorbed it on a different level, and then I could, sort of implement, as we went. So, yeah.
But you're more willing to learn. I mean, somewhere along the line, you woke up one morning and said, do I want to be here? Is this company I want to work for? Like, yeah, but, right? And that's when you start to realize that stuff and dig back into what are we doing that's working? Let's celebrate that. And if we've got some problems that are some chinks in the armor or whatever, then let's backfill that and be willing to dig deep, with those things. And but it's being intentional every day and understanding where we're going and what the expectation is and why do we exist and, all those things, and then hiring to that. And unfortunately, like you said, sometimes we do get a little bit of bloat going on, and maybe we hired some roles that we thought we needed or people that we thought we needed, and some days you find out you don't. And that's a difficult conversation to have. But what I've learned from that too is a lot of times when you let those people go, a lot of times they're happier because they probably weren't as happy as they thought they would be in the job anyway. And they were just going through the motions sometimes. And that doesn't get us to the next level. That keeps us stagnant is what happens to us.
I think as well, like when we were sort of identifying some of these inefficiencies within the business, it was like empowering for the team that sort of stuck around to know that we're just trying to help them achieve, like do their job better. And so it was kind of a relief for them as well, so, but you know what, that kind of ties in, I suppose, to what you were just saying before. And I think this is important why, and truthfully, I'm probably haven't been doing this enough within our own business, but like having those regular monthly conversations with people so you can kind of turn screws at the micro level before it turns into a macro problem,
Well, yeah. And you get to know people and you can start to sense, how are they really doing? I mean, you can tell if they're stressed out or not long before they come to you ready to explode, or you find out, hey, look, what kind of training opportunities do you want? Where do you want to go within an organization? And where do you want to grow to? And what do you want to see done differently? And if you're willing to truly listen to those answers, they may take you in a direction you weren't even willing to go yet, or maybe someone can point out something that you've got that blind spot that you just don't want to see, and they can bring it to you because it creates that culture of trusting it. But it does create accountability, and that is part of it. Look, you said between now and this next meeting, these were the 3 or 4 things you were going to work on. Where are we at with that? And it brings it all back full circle to all of us getting better every day and wanting to be a part of a company that's growing. And that word spreads. I mean, that drives that employee engagement, and that's that emotional tie to the company that you work for that makes you take the next step and want to be willing to go a little further ahead than you would have before. You're emotionally tied to the thing. Your personal goals, your professional goals all tie back to the company. And that's an extremely powerful place to be as an organization. But you've got to be intentional in those meetings and have those conversations. And like I said, don't be afraid of the answer. That's a lot of times why people don't do it one-on-one is because they're afraid to ask the question because they don't want to get the answer.
Mm. Yeah, sure. What are some of the other things that you see culturally, that are good from the perspective of the business and the team members involved in the business? I'm talking about maybe like meetups and gatherings and calendared events at certain cadences throughout the year and all these kind of things.
Yeah. The number one thing I would say is get the team involved. Right. I've got a client I work with, and I was talking to the owner, and his kids are also in the business. So I was talking to the owner, and we were going to run a quarterly contest for, I think it was membership growth. And so he and I were talking. It's like, hey, let's do this at the first quarter, this the second quarter, this the third, and this the fourth. And each of those goals would get bigger, which meant the celebration was bigger. But he and I were talking about, let's get everybody together on a Friday afternoon at the office, and we'll do whatever. And one of his kids came in and said, no, the last thing I want to do is hang out on a Friday afternoon with you. And I'm like, that's fair. But then I said, okay, well, what would you like to see then? And they live in a really cool town, and they do on Friday afternoons, a lot of times they do this wine walk thing in town. And, instead of getting together at the office, they all got together and did that. And they could bring their significant other with them and hang out in a more social environment, still tied it back to the goals, but it was more of a social environment that was away from the office. But again, we had to be willing to listen to somebody else's input and say, I can understand that now. Was it a little bit more of an investment? Sure, it was a little more expensive, but it got the whole team engaged, and it was input from everybody else. So I'm a big believer in those things, and I've got a couple of clients that do a fishing trip every year. I have a client last year took, this was a big one, but it's a smaller company, but they took 13 people to Mexico for a week on vacation. I mean, had to shut the company down to do that. So you got to do it during the off season. You're not going to do that in July for sure. But little things like that, I'm a huge fan of getting everybody together. I mean, I think that goes a long way towards building the team and building cohesiveness. And if you can get their significant other involved, if they've got one, that just builds it that much faster. But, I know with what I do with BDR, if it wasn't for my wife and kid, there's no way I could do what I do. I mean, getting my spouse involved in those things and being appreciative of her is an enormous thing. I mean, because if I'm on the road for, a week, well, somebody's got to keep the house together. I mean, and that, if it wasn't for the rest of my family, that wouldn't happen. And I think all of us need to realize that and don't forget to bring the rest of the family in and say thank you to the support system that's behind the scenes. Yeah.
I think, like a lot of the businesses that over here, and I've worked in some of these as well over the years, going back, but some of the good cultural things that they'll do could be like a barbecue every couple of weeks in the morning, or that often then that'll tie into some sort of like training or something along those lines, team training, toolbox talk, whatever it might be, something along those lines. So they kind of make like a morning out of it, where they can sort of justify bringing because it's on paper it's unproductive really. You've got your team in the office, and they're not out doing jobs, so you got to I suppose you got to run the line between like that cultural efficiency and productivity or whatever. But I guess in essence they were saying, well, look, we're going to pay you to come in, like you're being paid to be here, whatever. So we just want you to have a good time and learn, and it's just a good fun environment.
It is, and like I said, technically it is non-productive time or non-billable time, but what you gain on the backside of that is enormous. Building a team that wants to be together. Look at the math on it. But we spend more of our waking hours with our coworkers than we do our own family members. Right. So I may not want to hang out with you on a Friday night and have iced tea together, but we better like each other from 7 to 5. And continuing to build those relationships is a huge thing. And unfortunately with BDR, we don't get together every month just because of where we're all at. But every year we all get together. And the last 2 years we've been in Seattle again for Seattle-based training, and we always do a company picnic if people want to hang out. And it's amazing to get to spend time with all these folks that you maybe only see once. You talk to them quite a bit during the year, but you only get to see them physically one time a year. It's amazing for us to do that, and I appreciate that as an employee. It means a lot to me to get back around people that I like to be around. And then I think so. I'm a big fan of the get-togethers.
In your notes I was reading yesterday, there was something that I wanted to touch on in line with employer brand and then like the hiring process, like what that actually looks like. So I think in my experience, process especially made a huge difference to us when we started hiring, because we made it very hard. And we deliberately made it hard to weed out and to, and even last week, we had someone applying for a job and they got through to the final stage and then fell off. And if it wasn't for that process, they probably would have been working for us and it would have ended up being a disaster. So It's a little bit different for us, I suppose, because we're not like, we're more predominantly remote, and it's a little bit sort of a global market for us in terms of team, whereas a lot of, our clients and the listeners and viewers of this podcast are kind of more like location based. But I still would like to hear what the hiring process looks like from a vetting perspective to avoid, well, we'll hire you if you can fog a mirror, that kind of thing. And employer brand, what is that?
So I think when you talk about hiring process, get it ahead of time. We want to have something that's developed long before we actually start recruiting people, because I don't want to try to take somebody through the motions and then not be ready, and I lose that great candidate, or like you said, I actually hire the wrong candidate. So it's going to start with recruiting. I'm constantly, if I'm not in a position yet to be that employer of choice, you never stop running ads ever, and make sure your ads are compelling so that when you're hitting the job boards, you're not just one of 300 that are out there. You've got to make sure your wages and benefit packages are towards the top of your market. Not, you don't have to be number one paying in your market, number one in benefits. You better be that top 20% is a part of that. And again, having that great culture, but having something you can follow every single time. So I'm going to, what am I looking for on the resume? Truly understand what that is. And get a resume from people. Don't, make sure they're putting some effort into coming to work for you, and make sure your interview process is the same every time. My personality type, especially when I interviewed salespeople, is I love to fall in love with people. I don't need more friends in my company. I need the right fit within my company. So have a process, have those 10 questions or whatever number it is that you're going to ask of that particular job role every single time. And don't stray from that, and don't let somebody sell you on how awesome they are if they're not going to follow your process. Make sure you do that every time, and make sure you're qualifying people and disqualifying them at every step. And it sounds cold, but it's not, because you're protecting your brand. That's what you're ultimately building, is a brand that stands out in the marketplace for both future employees, existing employees, and your customers. But you've got to follow that process every time and interview them, and then make sure they fit still, and then go through the background checks and all the stuff legally within whatever state or country you're in, doing all that legally and ethically, and then when you make the offer letter, do all that kind of stuff. I mean, you've got to protect yourself, but you can't just go at it, if all of a sudden it's this busy season and we're down 2 service techs, so you do hire whoever can come in the front door. And if they can spell HVAC, like you said, or fog a mirror, or it looks like their pants are on the right direction, shoes are on the right feet, woo-hoo, we're going to hire them. That's not the right mode to take. I mean, it never stops. You can't.
Yeah. I guess some of the things maybe that you guys could consider. Well, some of the things that we've seen work well with recruitment is, first of all, before we even. And I don't know what your take is on this, Chris, but I'd be keen to hear what your experience is. Before we even consider hiring someone, we make sure we have a scorecard for that role defined. And a scorecard essentially runs through what is the mission for that position? Mm-hmm. And what is that job actually like? What does done look like for that job? And then what are the key responsibilities, what are the KPIs? So what are the, when you look at the outcomes, what are the things you're looking for as an outcome? And the difference between an outcome and a responsibility is, like, an outcome is like a done thing. So it's like, you are responsible for closing, $100K worth of business every month in your truck. Like, that is, you've either done that or you haven't. Mm-hmm. And you want to have those sort of things like pretty well defined. Like, if it's grey, then it's hard for people to know if they're on track, right? Yeah. And so, and then also within the that job scorecard, you can put some of the responsibilities, competencies, for example. If they've got, if you're hiring for a qualified plumber, you want them to be a qualified plumber. They have to have that certification, in order to qualify for that application, so on and so forth. Yeah. So then once we have this job scorecard, we will then go down the path of creating a job ad. And the big move for us with the advertising of the position came from going back to the team and actually realizing that it's most likely through understanding people that people hang around people that are relatively similar to themselves. Mm-hmm. And if you've got good team members on board, there's a good chance that they associate with people that are pretty similar to them. So leverage some of their networks. And, we put some actions into place there where we can, get them to share the job listings to their networks, saying, hey, come work. Do you want to come work with me? Your friend, so on and so forth. This is what we're looking for. And we found that's been pretty effective because alternatively, you kind of go down that generic job board path, which is not necessarily bad, except for the fact that anyone that's any good already has a job.
Yes.
So you kind of got to put that into perspective. If you're just running at like job ads on Seek and LinkedIn and things like that, you're kind of looking for people that most likely aren't looking for a job. So you got to. It sort of becomes at that point a bit of a marketing exercise, and recruitment is, in my experience, absolutely a marketing exercise where you're trying to entice someone to go from somewhere else to come work for you.
Yeah. You're 100% correct to that. And I think it's somewhere around 80% of HR professionals now, maybe a touch higher, are saying that recruiting is more like marketing than traditional recruiting. Because you're right, the good ones already have jobs, and you're trying to catch them on that one moment in time where they're unhappy. And that's a pretty big fishing exercise, but just running ads, you'll get somebody on occasion, or maybe get somebody that's relocating. But and like you said, when you get that, you're becoming that employer choice, man, is what you're becoming, is what you're doing. Because that's when the rest of your team will recruit for you. You don't have to run ads anymore. Because you're that place that people want to be a part of. And that's an amazing place to be. And it is, absolutely. And I guess, but again, it's never a done thing. I think there's always things, and I'm like looking at it, thinking about it now, like, off the back of this call, I'm probably going to go and like just jot down a few ideas I've had while we're talking about this, and how we could improve the culture to make people want, to bring their, friends and whatever into the business. But regardless, I guess leveraging your team's network is a super powerful way to do it. I know I was speaking to, a mate of mine who there's a business up in Canada called the BTA. They're a coaching business up there, and they do like this pizza and football night or whatever, where you invite your team in, you order pizzas and whatever, and then you basically just get everyone to send out like a templated kind of message, which they customize to their Facebook pages and things or Facebook profiles and things like that. So you sort of build that internal recruitment, and then you remunerate them for it. Like if someone sticks around for 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, whatever it is, you can give them $1,000 as a thank you or whatever it might be. So it's pretty effective. Yeah. But it ties back though again to the culture. And that's
right.
And like I would have tech meetings or a whole department meeting, and you announce to the whole team, hey, we're hiring for people. If anybody knows anybody, let me know. And they all look down at the table. Well, that tells you right there that they're maybe not as stoked about being there as you are. And as it gets better, they will start referring people over. And a lot of us, maybe your Facebook profile or LinkedIn profile, you may have more friends or whatever on that than the company does. Well, getting your team to like and share that same post, it's astronomical the amount of additional people it gets to. But no one's going to put a referral. I'm not going to put my name on somebody to come work for BDR unless I truly believe they're going to be as good or better than I am and take the organization to the next level. Because I'm not putting my name on somebody that's going to make me look bad. That's the other side of that, is making sure your team, like I said, they're not going to refer somebody that's not going to be awesome, because I'm not going to hurt my own reputation with it.
I think as well, people rush the interview stage. Like they might have a meeting with one person and hire them off the back of it. And I've never seen that really work well, truthfully. Like we've sort of broken our interviews down into different stages now, where we've got like a coffee test or a gut test one, where like as soon as that application comes in, we just have a quick chat with them. Like if they can't look you in the eye, or they can't shake your hand, or they can't, the thing is with the job application, especially in the online space, like you can bullshit that all day long. You get ChatGPT to write a response and send it through, but if they can't actually talk to you on a call, then it's hard to fake that, right?
Yeah, and like you said earlier, having a process. Anytime I got a resume in, and it might even be, let's say you run into somebody in a parking lot, and they're like, "Hey, are you hiring?" "Yeah, we are. And I'd love to talk to you. Send me your resume, and we'll get the thing rolling." And a resume might be 3 bullet points in a text message. I'm completely good with that, because at least you took the effort, as opposed to just saying, "Yeah, I'm interested in you." No, you need to really put some effort into this, because I'm going to put a lot of effort into bringing you on board. And I always did a phone screen, always. I mean, in the middle of the daytime, call them and find out how they answer the phone. How do they handle themselves? And because you're right, there's a couple generations out there, and it's not just the younger ones. There's just as many Gen Xers out there that can't look somebody in the eye and carry on a conversation. But if you text message, they can answer with their thumbs. Well, that's not how we get business done. And I want to find out how do they handle themselves on the phone and what do they do. And then if that went well, get them assessed. I'm a huge believer in personality assessments. We've got an amazing one that comes to Recruit for Business that I think is phenomenal. Because it finds out, when you interview somebody, it's like the iceberg, right? You've seen the image of an iceberg before. You're interviewing what's above the line. What sank the Titanic was everything below the line. That's what I want to make sure I'm not hiring is all the rest of that stuff, and then I bring them in for a formal interview, and then it was 30 minutes, hard 30-minute time frame. So I had to make sure I knew the 8 or 10 questions, and afterwards, we did have a very similar scorecard. How did they handle themselves? Did they look up at the sky on every answer? Were they extremely nervous? And not everybody's a professional interviewer. So when I say they were nervous, I'm going to give some caveats to that. Not all of us can carry on a conversation and not be nervous. I'm a sweater by nature. I have a tall forehead. It's pretty obvious when I start to get nervous. You can see it. But there's a different level of nervousness that can come with interviewing versus I lied on my entire resume and none of this is real. You can, and doing that face to face. And like I said, keep it at 30 minutes, have 15 minutes right after that to score them, go through all their answers, because I want to make sure if I've interviewed 5 people today, I truly remember which one is which.
Sure. Yeah. It's been useful as well for us to have so all that stuff you talked about, the profiling, like we do that actually in the recruitment stage. If they want to apply for the job, they have to do those things. And so, again, we just try and make it hard because, and we say to them, like, send a Loom video in talking about how you would, why you should work here, and like if they don't do the Loom video, we don't even consider it because chances are they probably can't speak or they're afraid or they're too shy or whatever. But that's not really part of our culture, like we don't want that. Yeah. So that's been useful too, like immediate disqualifier,
But you're protecting yourself because I don't want to spend all the time and energy doing that if you're not going to put something in. And what I don't want to do is just go through the whole process, either have the person ghost you when they were supposed to start or find out they used your job offer to go back and squeeze $5 out of their current employer. I don't want you. I don't need you if that's the goal of this thing. And like you said, doing the Loom video up front, they've got to put some effort in.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, cool.
I'm a huge fan of that.
Mate, it's been good. I feel like we could talk all day, but I suppose respectful of the fact that it's probably getting a little late over there, we should probably start wrapping things up.
Yeah. Because it's I guess about 6 o'clock here. We're getting close to 6 o'clock. So.
Oh right, okay, yeah. You better get back to the girls, or you'll be in trouble. Well, mate, no, thank you for your time. Let's maybe not keep it so long between chats next time round.
Matt, I appreciate that, and again, thank you for having me on again. And anytime, man, I'd love to be a part of it. So
sure. And just before we wrap up, where can people get hold of you?
Easiest place is to go to the BDR website, www.bdrco.com. Probably the best place to find out who we are, what do we do. I am on LinkedIn. The Chris Koch, CHRAS, last name is KOCH. So you can find me on there. And just again, appreciate the opportunity. And the BDR website is probably the best place. So
cool. And is there anyone specifically that like you guys know, like who's your perfect avatar?
You mean like client research or client?
Client, yeah.
Anybody that wants to grow their business profitably and take care of their team. I think it's probably the people we're really looking for. We're, if you're already in a bad straits and you're just looking for somebody to be a silver bullet for you, if you're not willing to put in the work, nobody can help you. You got to be willing to lace them up and run beside us, and we'll go to the end of the earth for people that are willing to do good things.
All right, Chris, thank you so much for your time. Listeners and viewers, if you've got any questions about anything, as always, let us know in the comments or wherever you see this come through, emails, so on and so forth. Otherwise, that
is a wrap.
Hey guys and girls, how would you like all of the value adds left behind from our podcast guest all put together in the one spot? We've pulled every tool together, every template, every resource shared on the show, and we've packed them all into the Tradie Academy. It's free to join and it's built by the team behind the Site Shed and Tradie Web guys. Inside, you'll get marketing tips, business tools, and first access to future resources, all in one simple dashboard. Just head across to tradie.wiki/pod. That's tradie.wiki/pod. The link's in the episode description. And once again, you just log in once and then you're all set. And if you want to get notified of upcoming episodes, hit subscribe or follow.